All right, guys, I thought that I would do just one short clip before jumping into chemistry. And this one short clip is about body fluids and compartments. Um, the fact that we are basically composed of water, and there's all sorts of stuff dissolved in that water, is paramount to understand. And in the medical field, we're always concerned with those things in some way, shape, or form. Many of the people in this course are looking at nursing, and there's going to be a huge nursing exam in the second semester about body fluids. One of the first things you might do with someone who's passed out from dehydration or has some kind of medical condition is you hook them up to a catheter so you know how much they're urinating, right? And maybe you'll monitor their fluids, how much, maybe you'll add fluids if they're dehydrated. So body fluids and compartments, where those fluids exist, these things are important to understand. And of course, in all of these fluids, we have these dissolved nutrients and electrolytes, basically ions that we'll talk about in the next clip, vitamins, respiratory gases, all those things are existing in that water. Okay, so keeping an eye on where the fluids are, understanding relative concentrations and relative locations of those fluids is important. So the first thing, let's just get some basic definitions down. All right, so one thing I would want you to know is basic term intracellular fluid. The roots are key in this course, okay? So let's break these terms down. Intra, right? So if I have something that is intracellular, intra implies they're inside. This is very different from inter, right? If I have something that's like interpersonal communications, right? Well, that means there's communication between you and another person. Inter doesn't mean that it's something happening just inside you. It means that it's between you and another. Okay? Similar here. If I say intracellular, it means we're talking about something that's inside the cell. And in this case, the fluid is what we're talking about. So intracellular fluid is going to be referring to fluids inside cells. And it so happens that a good 2/3 of our total body fluid, of all of the liquids that are in us, are actually inside of our cells, right? 2/3, more than half. Now, I'm not going to get too hung up when it comes to these numbers, all right? I'm not going to ask you, what's the percentage, right? What's the percentage body weight? How many liters is that, right? I'm not going to ask you that. But a big picture would be there's more intracellular fluid, right? 2/3 is more than half. Then there is extracellular fluid. Now this is telling us something as well, right? We look at the roots. Extra would not be inside the cells at all. This is fluid outside the cell. So extracellular fluid, well, that's about 1/3. So less than half, about 1/3 of our fluids are outside of the cells. All right, and we could talk about cells in lots of locations, right? We could say, how about cells that are in the blood, right? Okay, so I can talk about cells that are in the blood, okay? And I could talk about the plasma around those cells. So if we just take blood alone, it's not just liquid, right? Even though it behaves like a liquid. Blood alone is going to have intracellular fluid inside the blood cells, right? And it's going to have extracellular fluid, plasma we call it, which is outside of those blood cells. We could say the same for different tissues. If I take a chunk of muscle, right, out of your body, and I look at it and I say, okay, is all of the fluid that's contained within that muscle inside the cells? And the answer would be no. A lot of it is inside the cell. The muscle cells have intracellular fluids there. But there's also fluids bathing those cells right in the muscle tissue itself. Extracellular fluid. Okay? So these are kind of some big picture items we want to think about. Fluids could be inside cells, fluids could be outside cells. All right? Another way of thinking about fluids in the body would be to think about the fluid that is contained just inside the blood vessels. The vascular compartment, right? So we could talk about the vascular compartment where the blood is, and we could talk about intra and extracellular fluid there in the blood. And I guess it would be just another way of talking about the blood, right? We'd say in the vascular compartment we have a certain amount of fluid. And what we're all really saying when we say that is we have a certain amount of blood. Okay? If we talk about the tissue compartment, well then we're talking about intra and extracellular fluids that can contain within tissues, like muscle, or even bone. Believe it or not, bones have liquid in them, okay? As hard and rigid as you think bone is, it also has water and fluids, okay? All right, so these are just some big picture items, things to think about when it comes to fluids. All right, we'll leave it at that. Like I said, a real short one, and then we'll jump into chemistry next time.